Hey everyone, it's Zach Wright with IMEO Company, Improving Management, Employees, and Organizations. And today we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is strategy. And this is a continuation of our series that we've been doing over the past few weeks, which is we talked about your vision statement. Then we talked about your mission statement. And in each video, we talked about not only what it is or how to do it, but why it's important. And we're going to do the same thing in this video. And we're going to also share our screen at a later point to walk you through a strategic planning guide or worksheet that we've created that you can download with the link in the description. So let's go ahead and dive into what we're talking about today. First, it's what is strategic planning? Because I think that there's a misconception out there whenever people are talking about strategy. They really come at it at a surface level, right? They're talking about, oh, we want to achieve this, but then they don't do anything else after that or before that. And some of the things that we're going to talk about today is exactly how you can avoid being that type of person. So whenever we're talking about the strategic plan, this is a process where leaders of the company, or if you're a solopreneur, you can do this on your own as well. But leaders of the company define or revisit their vision for the future and identify the organization's key goals and objectives. Now, this process includes defining an operational cadence in which goals should be realized or met. And you can still call these company milestones that need to be reached to ensure that you're moving closer to the vision. So the strategic plan or the strategy plan typically represents long-term goals ranging from 3 to 5 years, but it can be longer depending on your culture, depending on your industry. And I would add to that it could be shorter too. For us, we typically go at it as what are you trying to accomplish in the next 365 days or the next year? So it really all depends on what you're trying to accomplish in your culture, in your company, in your industry. And I keep saying industry because it's very important to understand or acknowledge that you might be in a different industry than other companies out there. For example, e-commerce is more transactional. So your strategy might be a little bit quicker, especially if it's in fashion, because something is going to go out of date in the next year or in the next 6 months. So you want to be able to have a strategy that is flexible, but also a strategy that is more compact than just a 3 to 5 year period. Now, if you're a B2B enterprise, it might take 18 months to 2 years to close a huge deal. So maybe that is where you are trying to build in that 3 to 5 year strategy so your employees and your organization isn't constantly changing in the overarching purpose of what you're trying to achieve in that year or in that time period that you define. So that's what strategic planning is. Now we want to talk about why is it important? Because if you don't understand why something is important, or especially as employees, because employees always get told what to do, or they're kind of the low end of the totem pole whenever it comes to strategic things being presented to them. So it's important to, as a leader, as a CEO, as a business owner, to relay this information to your leadership team, and then make sure that your leadership team relays that information to the employees. Allow them to ask questions. Allow them to be involved to a certain extent if it's possible. Okay, so the question, why is strategic planning important? So simply put, businesses need direction and organizational goals to know what to work towards. That's why I get so excited about this goal or this topic, because you're clearly setting expectations for what you want the company to become in that time frame that you present or that you choose, whether it's 3 to 5 years or 1 year. It's giving the company direction. And anytime that an employee understands the direction of a company, they're more likely to understand if this is the company for them. And if it is, then they're more likely to stay there, your retention goes up, your absenteeism goes down, your productivity goes up, and your employee engagement goes up as well. So there's a lot of benefits to really diving in deep and not just saying, okay, we want to do this and then try to put it into play, because that's not going to work. That's not going to be beneficial for your employees or your company or your customers. And essentially, a strategic plan is a roadmap to get the business goals. Without such guidance, there's no way to tell whether a business is on track to reach its goals. Now, the next video that we go into is going to be on OKRs, which is what we focus on, as well as this segment here. We focus on mission, vision, strategy, OKRs, and all these things combined together really creates organizational health. And we can talk about that at a later video. But I think I've hounded a little bit about why strategic planning is important. And one of the things that I feel, and I've already mentioned, that a lot of companies will do is they'll sit in a room for an hour and go over ideas. But brainstorming and ideas is a fraction of what is really included in strategic planning. Now, before I go into the specific topics needed to really have a solid strategic plan, I want to go into 4 aspects of strategy development. So, whenever we're talking about strategy development or creating the plan, there's a few areas that we want to talk about. Okay, so the 4 aspects of strategy development is going to be talking about the mission, and you'll be able to see why we started with vision, then we went to mission, and then now we're talking about strategy. The second part is alignment with short-term goals. Then we're going to be talking about the steps involved in strategic planning process. And then we're going to lastly talk about the types of strategic plans that are out there. So let's go ahead and start with mission. Now, if you haven't watched the mission video that we've posted, I recommend you go ahead and watch that. But basically, the strategic plan starts with the mission that offers a company a sense of purpose and direction. The organization's mission statement describes who it is, what it does, and where it wants to go. So the other thing to call out is that missions are typically actionable. Now, it could be a mission statement, but it's telling us what we're shooting for as a company, as an employee base. Why do we wake up and come to work every single day? Now, as a part of this, there's different types of ways that you can measure your strategic plan. Now, a lot of people will use SMART goals. Some people will use KPIs, and then we obviously encourage you that you use OKRs. So that's key performance indicators or objectives and key results. The best way to go about it is you can have your KPIs, which is business as usual. These are the things that you have to do as a company to make sure that it's running smoothly. So a lot of that is going to fall into finance, sales quotas, different things like that is going to keep the needle moving forward. Then you have your OKRs, which are stretch goals. So that's where we're really able to be flexible and really shoot for the stars and really go above and beyond with what we're trying to accomplish. And the combination of both of those is, in our opinion, the best way to go. So make sure that you start with the mission whenever you're creating your strategy, because it has to be pulled from somewhere. And we want to make sure that it's pulled from what the company is trying to do and the reason that it wakes up every single day. Okay. The next one is alignment with short-term goals. Now, strategic planning should relate to the short-term and tactical business planning, because it can help business leaders with everyday decision making that better aligns with the business strategy. So whenever it comes to strategic planning, you want to be able to have periodical evaluations of the progress. Now, this is where OKRs come into, so I'm not going to go fully into detail, But let's say, or as a way that you can visualize this is you take your strategy and you break it down, reverse engineer it with, if this is our strategy, and let's use a current client. There's a client that we're working with that they want to go from traditional software selling to software as a service subscription plan. Now we're pretty much there already, but what we had to do is take that strategy, and obviously there's more details in that other than just that quote. But what we had to do is reverse engineer it and say, okay, we think that this is going to be a 2-year strategy plan. What do we have to do in the first year? And then we come up with the objectives, which we'll talk about through our worksheet here in a moment. But then we break those objectives that's going to happen in the next 365 days into quarterly objectives and key results. And we measure that each quarter. We say, okay, this is what we were trying to accomplish to get closer to our strategy, which ultimately helps us get closer to our mission, which ultimately helps us get closer to our vision. You can see why we started with vision, mission, and now we're at strategy. So that's a way that you can think about having your strategy align with your short-term goals. And we'll talk more about that in the next video where we go over objectives and key results and how it ties into your vision, mission, and strategy. Now, the third portion here is the steps involved in strategic planning. So we're looking at identify, we're looking at prioritize, implement, and then update. So let's break these down. Whenever we're talking about identification, a strategy or a strategic plan cycle starts with the determination of the business's current strategic position. So if you're building a new strategy, think about where your current strategy lies and how did you accomplish, or what did your progress look like in that time frame. So you want to have your key stakeholders using the existing strategic plan, including the mission statement and the long-term strategic goals, to perform a needs assessment or a SWOT analysis. Now, a needs assessment and a SWOT analysis are similar in a sense. To me, the way that I explain a needs assessment is you're going to go through what you accomplished in the strategic plan period that you chose before you're creating the new one, and what you accomplished, and then where did you fall short? And now, knowing what you know about the industry, what is needed to close gaps and move forward and still become competitive and ultimately become a leader in the industry. That's a needs assessment. Similar to that, you're going to use a SWOT assessment to help identify the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats that your company might face. So this is very much like a management consultant term or an MBA term. But basically, this is very important because you're taking the time to understand your industry better. And whenever you understand your industry better, you're able to create a strategic approach. You're able to be proactive more than reactive. So as you identify these things, that's going to help you understand what comes next. So you've listed all these things out. You have your SWOT analysis, you have your needs and assessment, so on and so forth. Now you need to take what you've identified and prioritize it. So this is the part where you're really going to break it down and understand your main objectives for this strategy plan that you're creating. Now, again, as everything in this section has mentioned, you want to make sure that it aligns with your company mission and goals, and make sure that it's going to move the business towards achieving its vision. So there might be many potential goals as you identify, but the goal here with prioritization is what it sounds like, is to break it down into the most important things that are going to move you closer to your goals as a company. Now, this is going to help identify the objectives or the KPIs and the objectives and key results in this stage. It's very important because whenever you break down this prioritization, you're saying to someone else, Everything else outside of this, unless something comes up, we have a conversation and we update the strategy, we have to forget about those. Now, there's a lot of companies that put it in perspective. There's a lot of companies out there who are consultants or they do managed services. And whenever they go out there and try to sell to customers, they make it very customized. And then let's say it's a software company. The salespeople will promise the customer X, Y, and Z without speaking to the engineering team. And what happens there is you're bringing in a customer doing something that you don't really know if you can do. And then engineering has to run around like a rat on a wheel trying to figure out what to do. And think about that. They're taking so much time and energy over here. They're not improving the product. They're not helping out the customers get answers. And it's taking away from what you're actually trying to accomplish as a strategy. So avoid that. That's where the prioritization comes into play. Then the third piece of this is implementation. So once the strategy plan is developed, it's time to put into motion it's time to put it into motion. And that requires clear communication. And we'll go into some of that whenever we talk about the worksheet. But there's 3 ways to communicate, and we'll talk about that. It's you want to make sure that people understand the strategy, understand why we're doing the strategy, and make sure that we're actually tracking the strategy. So you want to make sure that there's a clear communication plan. You want to establish the measurements and the reporting so people understand what to focus on. And then this implementation is typically going to include strategic management with regular strategic reviews. I can't talk to ensure that the plan stays on track. And now, again, OKRs is a great way to do that. So the last portion of this, before we get to the fourth of the strategy development pillars, we're talking about update. So a strategy plan is periodically reviewed and revised to adjust priorities and reevaluate goals as business conditions change and new opportunities come up, right? So quick reviews of metrics can happen quarterly. We talked about that with OKRs, and adjustments to the strategic plan can occur annually. Now, the stakeholders may use balance cards and other tools to help measure the performance goals. And for us, we have a simple way to do that with our partnership of what used to be GTM Hub. They're now Quantive, and our approach with our OKR program package. Okay, so that is the portion of that. And then the last portion of the development of strategic planning is the different types of strategic plans. So just to clearly call them out, one is business, the other is functional, and then the last one is corporate. So whenever we're talking about business, we're talking about creating a competitive advantage and opportunities for growth. And your plans are adopting a mission evaluating that it evaluates the external business environment. You're setting the goals, and then you're allocating financial, human, and technological resources to meet those goals. That's what we mean by business. Now, the next one is functional. A functional strategic plan is going to fit within your corporate level strategies and provide a granular examination of specific departments or segments such as marketing, HR, finance, development. These functional plans focus on policy and process, such as security, compliance, while setting budgets and resource allocations. But in most cases, strategic plans will involve elements of all these, including the last one here, which is corporate. So a corporate-centric plan defines how the company works. It focuses on organizing, and aligning the structure of the business. So again, it's policies, processes, and senior leadership to meet desired goals. So for example, the management of research and development might be structured to function dynamically on an ad hoc basis. It would look different from management team to finance to HR. But as I mentioned, there's a combination of all these strategic types. So you're going to probably have business, functional, and corporate all tied into one. And then you're going to have separate development areas or development plans for each department. So as we finish out this video, what I want to do is run through our strategic planning worksheet, because I'm a visual person. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you might be as well. So what we're looking at here is the strategic planning worksheet or guide, and it's designed to help you create a successful strategy for your business. And it's going to cover tons of stuff here, but it's covering what we've already discussed. So you want to list out your vision here. You want to add your mission so you know where you're pulling from and getting into the weeds on what strategy you need to do as a company. So as we continue down here, we're talking about the identification. So this is the part of strategy development. So you want to identify your current state and your state of business. And so we're going to list that out here. This is going to be your current strategy. Then you're going to go into your company highlights. This is what we're talking about as what did you achieve as it pertains to your last strategy that you defined the year before or years before. Then from that, you also want to define the priorities for the next year. So let's break this down into financials, internal business processes for operational excellency. Then you want to look at your organizational capacity. How many people do we have in the organization? How many will we need? That type of stuff, headcount planning. Then what are your customers and stakeholders? How are we going to gain new customers? How are we going to maintain the customers that we do have? How can we bring in more customers from referrals, marketing, so on and so forth? Then we have it broken down into stage one of how you're really going to approach this. Now, if you wanted to, what you could is start with step or stage one and then fill out the other things above, because this is going to give you more of a detailed look into what needs to be the strategy moving forward. So the first part here is analyze your context and environment. And what that really means is that we're going to go into a full-on SWOT analysis. So whenever we're talking about strengths, we're talking about what do we do better than anybody else in our industry or our competitors? What makes us stand out? This is where your value proposition is going to come into play. This is where why you won the deals that you won comes into play. And you want to double down on those strengths. Then on your weaknesses, you got to be honest with yourself and transparent. Don't try to hold anything back, because if you hold anything back, it's not going to be helpful for you in the future. So weaknesses could be our competitors have X, Y, and Z feature, and it's really causing us to lose, let's say 50% of our deals. If that's the case, we definitely want to add it here, because we can take our weaknesses and put it into the priorities that we need to focus on to close that gap and continue to improve ourselves. Now, opportunities could be certain things like, okay, we've really been able to target and win this market. So maybe it's a product company, a fintech company, and they're winning with the financial services industry. But what about healthcare? What if there's a way to go into health insurance instead of just financial, so you could have a vertical opportunity of growth? Or is there something happening in the market that is helping or that will help you have an opportunity to grow significantly if you can tap into that market before any of your competitors? And then threats. For example, right now at the time of this video, we don't know if there's going to be a big recession coming. So macroeconomics could be a threat. Or competitors poaching you because you don't have the up to par technology compared to your competitors. So the engineers are tired of working on the old tech or old code, and they want to go to a new area. So these are different types of examples for a SWOT analysis. Now, I also mentioned the needs assessment. These are the top areas that you're going to want to be talking about. You want to have your supporting data, your prioritized needs, your goals, your allocation of funding, and then your stakeholder input. So, example, what we need to be talking about here is the needs of the company. And so what you might want to start out with is the middle column, the goal, or the prioritized need. So what do you need to achieve what you're trying to achieve? Write it in a goal format, and then think about how you can, do you have the data to understand the actual needs? Do you have the data or the baseline to meet that goal or be able to measure it and see if you can meet it? And then the last part, or the last two parts, is the allocation of funding. If we're trying to do this, can we actually do that? And then share the feedback with the team and get their input, get their understanding, keep them in the loop. Because a lot of times companies don't involve their employees, and the employees closest to the customers have some of the best things that they can bring to the table. So don't ignore that. Now, you also want to analyze your environment. Now, we're going to be using the Porter's 5 forces here. And if you're not familiar with that, that's going to be the buyer bargaining, your supplier bargaining, your competitive rivalry, the threat of potential entrants, and then the threat of substitute products and services. This is basically getting a lay of the land of the industry that you play in and your competitors. So I won't go into full detail on that. There's probably tons of videos out there on YouTube or articles that go into that. Then you want to analyze your customers and shareholders. Now, this is just a diagram that you can leverage, but you want to see if you have support and influence from your customers or your shareholders here. And then the last portion of stage 1 is analyze your competitors. So you want to compare your company. Again, you got to be honest with yourself here. You want to compare your company, products and services, customer segments, value proposition, marketing, and organizational strengths. So you can see in this first column, you have your layout of your company, your truthful answers here. And again, just as being honest with yourself and your company, you also have to be honest with your competitors. If they're better than you in something, say it, because everybody knows it. But if you avoid it, especially as a leader, then that's telling your employees that, oh, we can get away with saying this or not mentioning this or kind of sweeping it on the rug. But no, that doesn't do anything for anybody. You have to call out your weaknesses, and that's the only way to actually move forward. So stage 2 is whenever we're going to identify strategic options. Now, just as a reminder, this worksheet is to apply everything that we discussed at the beginning of this video. So if it sounds a little bit redundant, that's because we're applying what I said at the beginning into the actual form that you can use to do these things. So strategic options, what you want to do is brainstorm. Now, earlier I mentioned that strategic planning is not just brainstorming. Just because it's not just brainstorming doesn't mean that it's not included. So what you want to do here is explore the projects that you run to develop a competitive advantage. So you're thinking of ideas on how can we take the company from A to B to be more competitive, where customers choose us over the competitors, and for us to stay relevant or ahead of the curve. Then we want to examine the opportunities and threats that we already identified in our SWOT analysis. And now we want to think about how can we maximize this opportunity and how can we minimize this threat. Now, there's going to be some where you can't control the threat. We mentioned macroeconomics. You can't necessarily control that, but what you can do is you can prepare in advance on what would we do if there was a big recession. How could we do X, Y, and Z without ABC? Things like that. And what you'll find is this strategic planning approach is really helping you think ahead of the curve, thinking ahead, being critical, and being truthful to yourself on how can we achieve what we're trying to achieve. And again, it all cascades up to your mission and to your vision. Now, the other portion of stage 2 is solve problems. So to find the problems you are experiencing and goals you are not achieving, ask yourself these questions. Is there a problem in our industry others find it hard to deal with? and how can we solve it? When you ask yourself that, what you're really asking here is how can we create a blue ocean strategy? Now, quick metaphor, I can't remember which book it came from or who originated it, but blue ocean is the opposite of a red ocean. So if you're competing in a market that is saturated, you have a lot of people out there that are doing the same thing and they're using the same strategy. That's a red ocean because every shark is feeding on that one thing and there's blood in the ocean. A blue ocean strategy is whenever you swim away doing the same thing as the industry or providing the same product or service or software, but you do it in a different way where your competitors are over here fighting against each other and you are over here building a new way to do things. And the way that you can do this is finding out why or what the problem is by doing a 5 why analysis. So define the problem, ask yourself why, and then you get to the root cause. And that's where you can actually start to understand what are we actually solving as a company? How can we deliver that to the customers and have better outcomes? Stage 3, evaluating and selecting strategic options. So before in stage 2, we were coming up with strategic options. Now we're evaluating the strategic options, and we're going to be using the decision matrix that we see here. So you've probably heard of this. It's important, not important, urgent, and not urgent. So what you want to do is put all your strategic options on the table and then start adding them into these 4 squares. And what you'll find is you want to be able to focus on important and urgent and important and not urgent, because those are going to be the things that are going to continue to move forward. Now, if it's not important, don't waste your time on it. Especially if you're a startup or you're a solopreneur, you don't have the time to make mistakes or focus on things that aren't priorities. So this is really going to help you out here whenever you do this the appropriate way. Then you want to choose the best way forward. This is the last portion of our strategic planning worksheet. So what we're doing is taking everything that we discussed at the beginning of this video and then at the beginning of this screen share, and we're tying it all together to choose the best strategic options to develop your strategy. So you want to have your top strategy options. We recommend 3 to 4 objectives. So you're not spread too thin. You're not focusing on too many things. If you focus on too many things, you're not really focused at all. So you're going to identify those 4 strategic objectives, and then you're going to fill in the way to measure and then also talk about the intended outcomes. And the reason that this is important is because this becomes your strategy. This is what we're trying to accomplish as a company. This is how we're going to know we were successful. And so what we'll do in the next video is take this strategy approach and break it down even further into objectives and key results. So I hope with this video, you've been able to see that strategy is not just a plan that comes up in an hour-long session. There's going to be multiple sessions, or you might want to take your team off-site where there's no distractions from other meetings or emails or anything like that, and really focus in on what are you trying to accomplish as a company. I hope that this video was helpful. If you found it helpful and you think that anybody else could find it helpful, please share it with them, because that's why we do these videos. We want to be able to share our knowledge, and we want to be able to impact the world where we build a world where organizations operate effectively and treat others appropriately, and we want to make the workplace better for everyone. And we believe that through these different approaches that we put out here in our videos is the perfect way to do that. Also, last thing, if you are interested in learning how we can help you develop your strategy and then ultimately turn that into your OKR program, reach out to us today. IMEO or imeocompany.com is our website, or you can email us at info, I-N-F-O, at imeo, I-M-E-O, consulting.com. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.